G'day guys, this is Alex Calder. So this presentation is for the Sport and Exercise Science Department at Fitchburg State University. So look, I'm going to try and belt through this as fast as possible. I've got a lot of material I've got to show, so I'll try and keep it under 15 minutes. So over the summer I spent my internship at Purdue University, which is a D1 college in West Lafayette, Indiana. It has about 40,000 students. And they compete in the Big Ten conference. So my title was intern sports performance. So I worked with the 18 varsity teams that they have out there. So my roles and responsibility were pretty straightforward: of setting up and breaking down the gym to help the coaches maintain a good flow when they conduct their training sessions for the athletes. Gym maintenance was obviously just keeping the gym tidy and looking professional, so small things like making sure the plates were all up in the right way, so the P logo was at the top, so it always maintained a high level of professionalism, because there was always recruits and things like that walking through the gym, recruits, coaches, athletes, all that sort of thing. Coach and assist, and I'll dive into that a little bit more. Who I worked with, developing programs, and I have dived there. Again, I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then I also assisted the sport nutrition department with unloading their pallets and keeping the supplements in order and keeping everything tidy as far as their boiler fuel program goes. And then conducted testing like FMS and speed gates and things like that. So the FMS, the functional movement screen, they conduct a couple times a year with, depending on who the coach is, but a couple times a year with their teams. So this is a picture of myself and Mike Boyle. This was in Chicago at the Perform Better Summit. Purdue sent me up to Chicago for the summit to represent Purdue, so that was really good. 3 of the interns went up there, including myself, so there was a total of 7 interns for the summit, but 3 of us went to the summit. So the internship curriculum that they set out was pretty good and pretty strenuous, but it was very challenging. So they gave us articles every week, and it was a different topic every week, whether it was maximizing power development or long-term athletic development and things like that. They gave us articles every week, and then we had a round table with the 7 interns and the coordinator, which was Will Swan, and we just talked about the article, what we learned, what we could apply, and what we thought was useful, and etc. So then we also developed a microcycle and a macrocycle for the sport of our choice. So I chose Australian football, and then we sat down and pretty much broke down our programming amongst each other and spoke about the pros and cons and why we chose this and etc. And then we conducted 2 presentations, a hands-on and a final presentation, which I'll talk about a little bit later in depth. And then we also interviewed a staff member. So I interviewed Josh Bonatul because I worked with him pretty closely through my time there. So I'll talk about that a little bit too. So the initial steps, I put this slide in because there was an initial steps that we kind of took as far as interns go. So it was very much a program of what you put into it, what you get out of it. I mean, I could sit there and sit around and just observe, or you can kind of put yourself out there and ask some coaches if you can help them and work with who you wanted to work with. So I did a pretty good background check of everyone and got everyone's kind of a just broad idea of their coaching philosophy and their background and experience. So then I got to choose kind of who I wanted to work with, and I approached the coaches I wanted to work with that I thought would benefit me in the long run. So I was also chosen as a football intern. 5 of the 7 interns were chosen to help football. It seems like a lot of the programming and format is based around football. It's a big program at Purdue. And then I was, out of the 5, each of the interns were assigned to a coach, and I was assigned to Coach Dwayne Carlisle, who's also the Director of Sports Performance, has an extensive background with the 49ers and Philadelphia Eagles and things like that, so I assisted him. So working with football was a new experience for me. I've never worked with American football before. I've worked with professional Australian football and Australian soccer league and things like that, but never American football, so this was very, very new experience, and I learned a lot just from this. So again, I helped Coach Dwayne Carlisle with his setup, and he worked with defensive linemen, so I set up and broke down, and I gave him advice on what I thought would work better in regards to gym flow, because if you can imagine, there was 80 to 100 blokes running around in the gym, and they kind of needed to utilize the hour to make sure no one was waiting for equipment and things like that it needed to flow and it needed to have a good tempo and pace to it. And there was also strict rules when it came to football, because in the NCAA they only allowed 5 sports performance coaches for the football team, so the interns weren't allowed to coach, so that was kind of strict with that. We weren't even allowed to talk to the players, we weren't allowed to clap or encourage or anything like that, because that would be considered a form of coaching. And if the compliance officer walked through and saw we were doing that, then it would kind of break the NCAA rules. So it was a little bit different there. We just kind of stood there and did some record keeping, and then just provided advice and feedback for the coaches that we were assigned to. So then I worked, like I mentioned, I worked closely with Josh Bonaltul, who was the assistant director of sports performance, but he was also in charge of men's basketball, men's and women's dive too. So, which the diving consisted of David Badai and Steele Johnson, 2 guys who were competing for the 10 meter synchro and 10 meter individual at the Rio Olympics. So that was very, very unique to work with those guys, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then I also sat down with Josh every week, and he gave me an opportunity to raise the topic and pick his brain about it. So, some weeks I talked to him about velocity-based training, some weeks I talked to him about his idea of long-term athletic development and his structure of it. And he has a very, very great background. He was a strength coach at Chicago Bulls. He worked with Mike Boyle, and he worked overseas and presented overseas, and he was a guy that I learned probably most from. I think that his background was the most extensive out of all the coaches. So he provided a lot of experience coming into this position. And then I set up and break down with him, and he also critiqued me on my coaching skills, because I worked with basketball and dive. So then afterwards he would tell me some better cues to use, or some different methodology that I could apply to my coaching technique and things like that. So men's dive, so I'll just play this video in the background here. This is Steele Johnson here, doing his speed squats. It's just me in the background there. I was just observing, and then I'd throw him a couple of cues afterwards, and there's David Dyer as well. So work with these guys was unique. They had different program to the rest of the divers, because obviously they were prepping for Rio, whereas the others were prepping for season and the national tournament, which is a different time of year. So their program was different. There's one of the other divers there. They're kind of just goofing around, but that was a very, very good experience to work with these guys. Obviously training for Rio is something different, a bit of a bonus, but yeah, great experience. Super nice guy, Badara, as well. So I ended up taking over the dive program, because the 2 guys went over to Rio, and then Josh went to Spain with the basketball team. So he ended up having me program for dive, and then I ended up coaching dive just by myself, and I was with them for about 4 weeks that I was solely in charge of the program. So I was the only intern that had the opportunity to do that, but Josh gave me the autonomy, and he really showed some trust within me, but I had to earn those stripes. But it was definitely a good experience to work with dive. So men's basketball was the other team I was working with. So I mainly took the lower classmen, like the freshmen and a couple of the younger sophomore boys that had a little bit less experience compared to the others. So this is myself with one of the freshmen doing some perturbation stuff with the Swiss ball there. So obviously set up and break down for the basketball sessions, but I really got in there and did some coaching. Again, Josh gave me a lot of autonomy to work with these guys and pretty much just take over the lower classmen. And in the background you see big Isaac here, 7'2", 294 pounds, like absolute monster. Working with guys like that is just very, very unique, and it was a great experience there. So then Coach Will Swan was another guy I worked with. He's in charge of wrestling and golf, but I worked with him in wrestling. I got along with Coach Swan really well. He's about the same age as me, but he thought he really respected my philosophy and my view, and he thought I could bring a lot to his structure when it came to wrestling. So I helped him conduct the movement preparation portion, and then he had me coach the movement preparation part, so their warm-up, almost every time they came in, because he liked the idea of what I was doing in regards to movement prep, which was great. And then I also would sit down with Swan on a one-on-one basis and talk to him about certain things, and I, research that I came across and ideas that I had, and he would give me, advice on how I could put that into an application. And yeah, it was really good. It was really good from him. So the presentations I had, this myself with one of the other interns who was actually flew in from Germany for the internship. So there was there was hands-on, which was an opportunity for us to showcase some specialties that we had. And I did fundamentals kettlebells. I used to be a kettlebell instructor, and I didn't see a lot of guys at Purdue using them, so I thought I'd just try something different and see if I can get some of the coaches to think and ask some questions a little bit. And I really put myself in a challenging position, because I tried to do things that I thought I could bring ideas to the other coaches. And then my final presentation I did on the intricacies of movement preparation in a collegiate setting. So that was another one I wanted to see if I can get the other coaches to think and see if I can get them to ask me questions. And I really put a lot of effort into these, and I challenged myself. And so I'll show you one of these. So this is just a short snippet of my hands-on presentation with kettlebells.
My wrist and I create a fist, you can see there's a slight angle, so the natural angle of your fist. So I'm going to jam that into the corner, then grip from there, so then everything transferable. It's always a strong wrist.
So that's actually Coach Will Swan there. I used him as an example in my presentation.
Come up. I'm just going to go through without any kids, and then I'll show you. So pause here.
So I demonstrated the Turkish get up, and this was in front of the whole sports performance staff. So I demonstrated this, and I had handouts about how I would apply these exercises in a collegiate setting and what the benefits could bring to their program and things like that, which was really good for me. So my final presentation I did on the intricacies of movement preparation in a collegiate setting. So I have another short clip here, and then I have my full video here on YouTube if you want to go check it out, but here's just a 1 minute portion of it.
So I'll put these in the priorities of what I believe the role of the sports performance coach is. So number one, it seems silly to say, but no injuries in training. I think it's a pretty obvious thing to say, but I do touch on it. Then injury reduction or injury prevention, whatever you'd like to call it, before athletic performance. Athletic performance comes last. And I've got a picture here from Dr. Craig Duncan. He presented at the last year's ASCA conference. And I found this, again, I'll tie it all into how it relates to movement prep, but I found this very, very appealing, especially to the collegiate setting. So this was his idea of compliance amongst the sports medicine window, or sports science window, whatever you want to call it. So he's got athletes, I'm not sure if you can read that, athletes, strength and conditioning coaches, the medical department, sports coaches, and sports science analysis. Obviously, in this setting, you don't have a sports science analyst in this part, but he spoke a lot about to achieve the results from athletes, and to achieve these three things in particular is they all have to kind of comply with each other. Because if athletes come in and for example the strength and conditioning coach is unaware of a niggle or some sort of tweak that the athlete has, whatever, you're going to niggle, like a pulled hammy or whatnot, they should.
So I'm having a bit of a laugh of the terminology I was using, but the presentation went really well. I actually got a lot of questions and a lot of questions afterwards, and even for the next couple of days, which was great. I think I actually challenged some of the coaches in a way, and then they challenged me with some of their questions and their ideas of the movement preparation that I put forward. So it was great. So as far as moving forward for myself, what I learned a lot in regards to the collegiate setting. I've never worked in a collegiate setting before, so this was great for me, and it's a path I want to go down while I'm in America. And I definitely learned a lot about the structure and the hierarchy. It's different to what I've seen before. So in regards to the sports performance coach is considered top of the hierarchy, and then kind of trickles down to their assistants and then the sports performance coaches. So it's a little bit different to what I was used to in the Australian high performance, window. So it was a little bit different, but I think I've learned a lot in regards to that, and can make forward steps now that I have a good understanding of it. If I were to give a take-home message to guys who want to coach in the collegiate setting or do an internship at a Division 1 institute like this, is you really got to show a level of humility and put yourself out there, and not be afraid to be wrong and be corrected, because that's how you're going to grow and that's how you're going to learn. And it's better to do that rather than to sit back and be afraid to be wrong. And that was something that I did. I just put myself out there, and and I used David and Steele as good examples, as I'll go and coach them and throw some cues. And then Josh would critique me afterwards, and then I ended up building a good trust with Josh, and he just gave me full autonomy to do pretty much whatever I wanted with the guys at that point. So it was great, and then I learned a lot from that experience. So my future plans, pretty much a reason why I have to send this presentation as the way it is now is because I got offered a position with the University of Louisville in Kentucky. So I've accepted a role as an assistant sports performance coach, full-time position. Signed a 1-year contract with them, and I just started. So I've had no breathing space. I've moved straight from Indiana to Kentucky, and straight into a full-time setting, which is great. And I had some help from Josh with that, because the position came up and they called him and calls Will Swan, and they both gave glowing recommendations and then helped offer me a position, which is great. So and also moving forward on a personal basis is I'm doing a bit of research with the ASCA. Been in touch with Dan Baker over the last couple of months, and a company called Push, and they've supplied me with a push band, which is a velocity based training apparatus or monitor. I'm doing a bit of research with that in regards to monitoring using a device that's wrapped around you rather than string based. So I've been in touch with Dan. He's given me some good advice and good ideas of what I can do with it. And it's more of a trial and error process. I'm going to see how it goes and try and develop a research article and try and get something published. It was something I tried a couple of years ago with the ASCA and got a peer-reviewed article, and I didn't end up getting it published in the journal. So I'm going to try and have a crack at that again and try and get some publication in the next year or two. So yeah, thanks guys for listening. I appreciate it. Again, I'm sorry I couldn't get it out there to present for you, but I'm hoping this was good enough. Cheers.